Ataha, therefore, Pashandam, atheism, Ashritaha have taken shelter. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Bhrigu continued, since you blaspheme the Vedas and the Brahmanas, who are the followers of the Vedic principles, it is understood that you have already taken shelter of the doctrine of atheism. Purport. Bhrigu in cursing Nandishvara, said that not only would they be degraded as atheists because of this curse, but they had already fallen to the standard of atheism because they had blasphemed the Vedas, which are the source of human civilization. Human civilization is based on the qualitative divisions of social order, namely the intelligent class, the martial class, the productive class, and the laborer class. The Vedas provide the right direction for advancing in spiritual cultivation and economic development, and regulating the principle of sense gratification so that ultimately one may be liberated from material contamination to his real state of spiritual identification. Aham Brahmasmi. As long as one is in the contamination of material existence, one changes bodies from the aquatics up to the position of Brahma. But the human form of life is the highest perfectional life in the material world. The Vedas give directions by which to elevate oneself in the next life. The Vedas are the mother for such instructions, and the Brahmanas, or persons who are in the knowledge of the Vedas, are the father. Thus, if one blasphemes the Vedas and Brahmanas, naturally one goes down to the status of atheism. The exact word used in Sanskrit is Nastika, which refers to one who does not believe in the Vedas but manufactures some concocted system of religion. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that the followers of Buddhist system of religion are Nastikas. In order to establish his doctrine of non-violence, Lord Buddha flatly refused to believe in the Vedas, and thus, later on, Shankaracharya stopped this system of religion in India and forced to go outside India. Here it is stated, Brahmacha Brahmanan. Brahma means Vedas. Aham Brahmasmi means I am in full knowledge. The Vedic assertion is that one should think that he is Brahman, for actually he is Brahman. If Brahma or the Vedic spiritual science is condemned, and the masters of the spiritual science, the Brahmanas, are condemned, then where does human civilization stand? Bhrigumuni said, it is not due to my cursing that you shall become atheists. You are already situated in the principle of atheism. Therefore, you are condemned. Translation once again. Bhrigumuni continued, since you blaspheme the Vedas and the Brahmanas, who are the followers of the Vedic principles, it is understood that you have already taken shelter of the doctrine of atheism. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Once again, good morning. I think this In this, I think, is a conflicting story. So Brugumani starts the verse saying, "Since you blaspheme the Vedas and the Brahmanas who are the followers of Vedic principles." But the question I was asking myself was, did actually Nandishwara blaspheme all the Vedas and the Brahmanas who are the follower of the Vedic system? If you go back and see the verses that Nandishwara spoke in the previous maybe 5 to 6 verses prior to this verse, in all his curses, when Nandishwara, like it basically starts as we have heard, once Daksha kind of completes, and when he sees that nobody in the entire assembly of the sages, the demigods, the highly elevated personalities, everybody that were there, nobody was responding. Nandishwara, whose heart and soul is the service of Lord Shiva, then out of his sheer raw emotion, then starts to speak. And while he speaks, Nandishwara then very specifically, and he does not say that everybody who is a Brahmana kind of will fall into the materialistic ways, and he does not blaspheme, but he, like, without getting into the specific verses, he categorizes the target audience. Like it is quite important to always know who is your target audience. So Nandishwara categorizes into two sections of to whom he is actually referring to. And the first and foremost thing that he refers to those people who are envious of Lord Shiva. That is the first category that he says. And then the second one, okay, you might not be envious of Lord Shiva, but you're taking to education, austerity, and vows for the purpose of maintaining the body. And why does he say so? Is in essence, he is referring to Daksha, who is speaking from the position of envy, like the deep and intense envy towards Lord Shiva. And then he is speaking to the the priests and the sages from the assembly, who, as we all understand, like we also see in the story of King Vena, once Brahmanas actually understood that King Vena was not qualified to be the guru, then they use their position as the heads of the society, or the guiding heads of the society, and then decide that Vena has to go away. So similarly here, the Brahmanas who are supposed to be the guiding force for the performance of the Vedic sacrifice were performing for, and the reason they were performing the Vedic sacrifice is also for pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Daksha is kind of in that category of envious of Lord Shiva, and then the Brahmanas, in one sense, I mean, we don't, we're no in no way or position or in situated to kind of talk about what could have been the reason, but based on just kind of understanding from how Nandishwara is seeing it now, is he's seeing that okay, all of you Brahmanas are supposed to correct and guide Daksha when he's behaving in this way, but you're not doing it. And the only reason I can think is that you're not doing is because you have taken education, austerity, and the vows just for the purpose of maintaining the body. Um, it is at least in Kali Yuga, it is quite well known where um, many of great poets and uh, great great poets, and like somebody who is also into shastra reading, like education, austerity, and vows, they used to take shelter in in the assembly of these great kings just to maintain their body. And but then we also have other stories of other devotees who have, like, I don't have anything to do with you, and I'm just trying to propagate the mission and the teachings of the Lord. So what Nandishwara was referring to is Daksha, who is envious of Lord Shiva, and then taking to education, austerity, vows for the purpose of maintaining the body. Now, why is it that what is the basis of Nandishwara saying for this, that anybody who is envious of Lord Shiva is, if you go back into the discussion between Prachetas and Lord Shiva, when Prachetas go into performing Pracheta's, the Prachina Bhari's sons, when they go and perform the Vedic, the austerities, Lord Shiva appears, and then he says that I don't know, I know what you're going to do in next, so I'm, I'm, I'm happy to appear here, and the reason I've appeared here is because I know what you're going to do next, and I'm so pleased with you all. And then there are, I think, 3 to 4 verses where Lord Shiva speaks about how what is the relation between that he shares with the devotees of the Lord. And in that, one of the very critical, the way he ends that, the specific verse is Lord Shiva declaring, where he says, "No one can be as dear to the devotees as I am." And then he also kind of precedes that by saying that devotees are all as worshipable as Lord Himself, and because we share that mutual respect and admiration and all of that to each other, then Lord Shiva declares that no one can be as dear to the devotees as I am. And then we also see here, Lord Shiva is Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambhu. Out of all the Vaishnavas, Shambhu, Lord Shiva is considered the highest. So anybody who is envious of Lord Shiva cannot be considered as a devotee of Lord. So Nandishwara and then um, anybody, again, we also understand from the Bhagavad Gita, anybody who is a follower who's truly understanding the Vedas and Prabhupada here then says Brahmana is somebody who's actually following the Vedic understanding. With that, kind of combining all three understanding, if you're actually a follower of the Vedas, which means if you're actually a Brahmana, then you cannot be envious of Lord Shiva. And then you'll also not use education, austerity, and vows just for purpose of maintaining the body. So, just from the viewpoint of plain Siddhanta, even if you take away the emotion of Nandishwara, of a loyal servant of Lord Shiva, just standing there and seeing his master being um, ridiculed, blasphemed, it's a tough position. But even if you take out that emotion, just from the viewpoint of Siddhanta, what Nandishwara spoke seems to be very valid and is also not seems to be blaspheming the Vedas and Brahmanas in general. But Durvasa Muni and Srila Prabhupada, as Srila Prabhupada writes in the first line of the purport, is actually not cursing Nandishwara to become an atheist. What Durvasa Muni is indicating is because you have blasphemed the Brahmanas and Vedas, you have already fallen to the standard of the atheism. And here is in kind of, it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada writes about what Lord Chaitanya says about the Buddhist system of religion. One of the understanding that of the in a way atheism is, as we have grown up, at least I myself have grown up, it was atheism and theism. Atheism was called as Nastikatvam or Nastika, and then theism was called as Astika. And in many times, we plainly define Astika and Nastika as somebody who believes in the presence of God or in the presence of ultimate, and then somebody who does not. But Srila Prabhupada here kind of clarifies that, saying the exact word used in Sanskrit is Nastika, which refers to one who does not believe in the Vedas but manufactures some concocted system of religion. So it is not just about, oh, I believe in ultimate superior, supreme Lord who is there, but I don't understand, I don't accept the eternal religion of Vedic understanding that has been passed down from the Lord Himself for millennium of years. I believe I know much better than all of these great personalities and the Lord Himself about Himself, and then I will come up with my own system of religion, and that is considered as Nastikatva. So, what Durvasa Muni is saying here is that because you're blaspheming the Vedas and the Brahmanas, you're because you have already fallen yourself, because you and all of your associates have already fallen to the doctrine of atheism, that is the reason you're blaspheming the Vedas and the Brahmanas. It is not the other way, that because you're blaspheming the Vedas and the Brahmanas, you are, yeah, you will fall into the doctrine of atheism. But it is the other way, because you've already fallen to the doctrine of atheism. That is the reason that is actually guiding you to blaspheme the Vedas and the Brahmanas, which is kind of. And then Srila Prabhupada goes in and elaborates on the whole discussion. Is one of the critical point that we can see here is, within the system of how the Lord is created, there is a role for each class. And Srila Prabhupada writes this in the purport in this way. He says, human civilization is based on the qualitative divisions of social order, namely the intelligent class, the martial class, the productive class, and the laborer class. The Vedas provide the right direction for advancing in spiritual cultivation and economic development, and regulating the principle of sense gratification, so that ultimately one may be liberated from material contamination to his real state of spiritual identification. Aham Brahmasmi. If Brahma or the Vedic spiritual science is condemned, and the masters of the spiritual science, the Brahmanas, are condemned, then where does human civilization stand? So, yes, Nandishwara, from his standpoint of Siddhanta and emotion, might be actually fully right in saying, to kind of direct his way of speech to Daksha, and then the assembled personalities who are not speaking up. Like, equate that with the example of um, the Draupadi. No, not, yeah, Draupadi. Um, when in the whole assembly, when she was being disrobed, and after the whole disrobe that happens, and Lord protects her, she actually speaks very harsh words towards the assembly, and saying that none of you are actually qualified to be called as great personalities, and this entire assembly is not qualified to be called as great assembly. um so similarly, Nandishwara is kind of is seeing that here is Lord Shiva, who is such dear to Lord Govinda, and then here is being ridiculed and nobody is standing up. But in spite of that situation, Srila Prabhupada is trying to, through his purport, is trying to establish the position of Vedas and the Brahmanas, or the teachers of the Vedas, the devotees or the personalities who embody the Vedic understanding. What is the position that we have to give to them? Because what happens in many a times, this is a typical situation that we see, is Nandishwara here is trying to be a justice crusader, which we see many a times. We see a wrongdoing that could happen either in the family or in the community that we are part of, or in the bigger society. It could be just the smaller community that we have, or it could be the bigger community, the society that we are part of. But in pursuit of being a justice crusader, what many a times you might end up creating is actually creating more trouble than actually solving the problem. Because if you when once we follow the whole entire story, eventually the specific verse that it says is Lord Shiva, who is to whom the actual injustice being is happening. And because it is as a servant, obviously if your master is being treated unjust, then obviously you also will be treated unjust. But the concern of Nandishwara is not that, oh, nobody is respecting me. The concern of Nandishwara is very clear, that Lord Shiva is being ridiculed and it's not being given then the correct amount of respect that needs to be given to him. But in pursuit of being a justice crusader, what Nandishwara ends up creating is actually more trouble, which even displeases Lord Shiva himself. Lord Shiva then, when he sees this entire cursing, counter cursing, cursing, counter cursing, all of this is going, Lord Shiva, the verse specifically says Lord Shiva becomes very morose. and he just leaves. So as a humble servant of Lord Shiva himself, what Nandishwara is trying to do did not even please his master. It's not that, oh, Lord Shiva was very pleased that Nandishwara understood his heart and is trying to um, bring justice and kind of make everyone understand their own position, make everybody understand what is Lord Shiva's position. That's not how Lord Shiva is seeing it. Lord Shiva is seeing and kind of unnecessary escalation of emotions. There is Bhrugumuni who is cursing, and Bhrugumuni is also the, the son of Lord Brahma and a brother of Lord Shiva. He's seeing his own dear servant cursing a broader society, and then he's also seeing his own dear brother kind of cursing his own entourage of devotees. So it's such a painful situation for Lord Shiva, and then he just becomes morose and leaves. So what is important to understand is that our role as being justice crusaders, because the term justice crusader is also quite interesting, because we want to kind of in trying to get justice to the people that we feel have been treated unjust, then we kind of crusade the entire path, and in doing so, it might so happen that we are actually the person who is behaving unjust, or it might be just from our standpoint of the understanding of the siddhanta and the understanding of the raw emotion that I'm going through. But from a greater good of how the steps that Nandishwara is currently taking, um, the end result, if not corrected and not dealt with properly, could be what Srila Prabhupada says in here when he says, if Brahma or the Vedic spiritual science is condemned, and the masters of the spiritual science, the Brahmanas, are condemned, then where does the human civilization stand? Because the only shelter for us to again ultimately go back into the shelter of the lotus feet of Shri Radha Sham Sundar is the Vedic spiritual science and the Brahmanas. And when we speak of Brahmanas, we are not speaking of the class of the Brahmanas, but as Prabhupada here says, the masters of the spiritual science. When we speak of Brahmanas, we are referring to the masters of the spiritual science, who, and Prabhupada also kind of explains um, in the purport where he says, the Vedas are the mother for such instructions, and Brahmanas or persons who are in knowledge of the Vedas are the father. Because it's very clear to understand. It's never about it should never be about the short term goal, because in short term goal we might achieve what we are trying to achieve, but in trying to doing so we might actually create a much bigger problem which will completely eradicate the only hope that we have for us. It could be one example, but if we kind of contrast that with the example of Parikshit Maharaj, we see Parikshit Maharaj was what Parikshit Maharaj did, objectively speaking, was wrong. He did not respect the sage appropriately. But when he was, but when he was, but when he was cursed, the one of the first classes that I remember hearing from this on this verse was by Govinda Prabhu from ISKCON Chaupati. He was saying that Parikshit Maharaj had every reason to counteract the curse. He had the qualification, and the entire world needed him to be the king. The entire like huge war was undertaken for establishing the Yudhishthir Maharaj as the king, and then he is the successor of Yudhishthir Maharaj, and he is keeping Kali at bay and then making sure things were all there. So he had every reason to kind of contract, but he understood that there is a bigger purpose of what Lord is trying to achieve here, and I'll just take shelter of that ultimate bigger purpose. It require it we cannot just blindly follow what Parikshit Maharaj did, and that requires guidance and shelter. But it kind of what I'm trying to come back here is that that single point is in trying to be a justice crusader. Um, let us not and let us still try to put effort in understanding of the bigger picture and what outcome our steps might actually cause in. And also let us not behave like Nandishwara, where the actual person whom I want to please by taking this step ends up actually getting displeased, and not just getting displeased. Morose is quite a strong word to use. It is not just small sadness or anything. Like in I think one of the ways to put it also is kind of feeling that devastated feeling, that what is happening here, like Lord Shiva just feeling this deep sense of moroseness, and just walks out. He does not even feel like talking and explaining. He just walks out. Like it feels like this is not the assembly where I should be sitting here. And then he just walks out, and then ultimately it ends up with Mother Sati kind of leaving her own body. So it's kind of quite a scary situation of how the entire assembly, including Nandishwara, kind of as created, which ends up in this sheer amount of violence. Mother Sati kind of leaving her body. Um, so those are some of my thoughts. Is kind of understanding the the longer effects it could potentially have. And it could also, one way one might say is, I'll just try to end with this is, um, in such a way, the easier option is to not take a step also. But that also is not something that we ought to do. We When we see something is happening, we have to take a step. But in taking a step is the ultimate north pole is the Vaishnava etiquette. Understanding, if am I that there are beautiful examples of how these are dealt with. But what Nandishwara and what Bhrigumani are kind of representing here is not the ultimate best way of actually kind of interacting on the basis of Vaishnava etiquette. And we are so blessed recently is on Srimad Maharaj and yes, Gomila Mataji kind of in such eloquent ways extolled the teachings of Vaishnava etiquette. And yeah, there are a lot of unjust things that we currently are seeing going on within our movement outside, and kind of, and this is the time that to kind of take shelter of those teachings of Vaishnava etiquette, and then ultimately try to bring some solace to this world. So I'll end with that. If there are any corrections or questions or comments, we'll leave the floor open for a few minutes. If not, I think we'll end it. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo nandoti vaishnavibhyo ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.